Hello my fellow Reptid Illuminati, I'm Isethoriginal and I'm invading half of this video today. So to make up for it, I suggest that if you like what he does, please go over to his channel and push the red subscribe button. If you know me, you're awesome, and if you don't, you should subscribe to me and be awesome too. Just kidding. The only reason people subscribe to me is to get off on my voice, and also I make good content. When talking about the universe, there are a lot of coincidences. The value of lambda, for example, or the proportion between electromagnetic force and gravity. And if any of those values, proportion, or other numbers are slightly changed, they would not lead to a universe as we know it, if to any at all, and therefore also not lead to life as we know it. So we are here, in a universe that has clearly a lot of different constants and a lot of different proportions that are very well fitting, or at least fitting enough, for us to live. And it begs the question, why is the universe like this? Why is it exactly right for our kind of life? And this question is tackled by the anthropic principle. There are two types of anthropic principle, the strong and the weak anthropic principle. The weak anthropic principle is the first I want to address. It simply states that if our universe wasn't hospitable to life, then we wouldn't be here to observe it. And since we are here to observe it, this universe happens to be hospitable to us. It is the approach most scientists and non-believers tend to adhere to. However, many people, especially the ones who believe in a creator who created them on purpose, often have a huge problem with this perspective, and their problem can be showcased very nicely by an analogy that the philosopher John Leslie made a while ago. There is a person facing a firing squad, 50 expert marksmen pointing their guns at him. Then the order is given to shoot, and they all shoot at the same time. Yet, somehow, all the bullets miss, and the person walks away completely unharmed. The weak anthropic principle's answer to that scenario pretty much boils down to, obviously the man is still alive, the shots didn't hit. Otherwise, he wouldn't be alive. It leaves away the explanation as to why the guns missed in the first place. The second anthropic principle, the strong anthropic principle, states that the universe necessarily is the way it is so that humans could observe it. This approach, obviously, is very liked by many religious people who hold the belief that the universe was specifically created with them in mind. And given that humans like to anthropomorphize a lot, for example, the computer doesn't recognize the Bluetooth on purpose because it hates us, the shadow on the tree is not really a shadow, it's a Sasquatch and it tries to steal our underwear. Or, of course, 90% of Star Wars and Star Trek aliens look like humans with some minor modification, because after all, we're the most common shape in nature. Except maybe of bacteria, and fish, and reptiles, and insects, and mice. Whether this way of thinking is useful or not doesn't change the fact that it makes sense to many people to simply anthropomorphize the cause of their existence and project a human-like entity into the sky and then simply state he did it. However, just like saying the guns missed is not really an answer as to why they missed, the answer that there is an invisible wizard who turned the barrels away is also not an answer as to why they missed. Especially considering that there is no evidence that such a wizard even exists, and even less as to why he would turn the barrels away in the first place. But while I cannot tell people why we are here, in this universe and on this earth, I can at least give you food for thought. First of all, we are not in the center of the attention. We don't live in the center of the universe. We are living in the suburbs of some rather insignificant galaxy. It's obviously very important to us because we happen to live on it, but it's not really anything special compared to all the other galaxies. And on this suburb galaxy, we live on a suburb solar system on one single planet. That leaves a huge amount of wasted space that is utterly useless and uninhabitable for us. And even if we focus on our current planet alone, we still have a very rough time to assume that it was created for us, because it is a rather mediocre fit for our species. 2/3 of the planet are completely covered by ocean, and therefore not habitable, unless we build artificial islands or live on ships. Then there are deserts that are very uninhabitable for humans and hardly populated, and if they are, we had to find all sorts of tricks to get by, or we had to build all sorts of infrastructure just to manage to properly live there. And then we have the poles and a lot of land around it, which again are only hospitable because we came up with a lot of tools and tricks to overcome the land's hostility. So the likelihood that we are adapted to our environment or come up ourselves with ways to adapt is much more likely than that the Earth was made for us and with us in mind. However, at the end of the day, the anthropic principle has no real solution. It may be a fancy way to keep our minds busy once in a while by coming up with different theories, for example that the firing squad missed on purpose, or that the ammunition didn't have gunpowder, or that the guns are actually holograms that the Illuminati put there to deceive the poor guy, the same way they put up the moon hologram to deceive all of us. The anthropic principle may make some people feel warm and fuzzy inside and special because it reinforces their belief that they were purposefully created and put there, or it may not make some people care at all. After all, we're here now and that's good enough. But if we want to be intellectually honest, all we can really say is that we don't know. And until we have the means to actually find out the truth, we don't know is all we know.
A common argument set forth by religious adherents is something cannot come from nothing. The question being asked is wrong. Asking this question is like asking, what is at the edge of the earth or what is north of the North Pole? Before the Big Bang, there wasn't any time because of general relativity. Matter and energy warp time, which therefore mix the time dimension with space. At the early stages of the universe was compacted into a dense and warped state. During this point of extreme temperature and warping, general relativity predicts a point where there were infinite or eternal. This point is hypothesized as a singularity, which means that our mathematical models and concepts of physics break down. Inflation theory states that there was a point during the beginning of the universe of rapid inflation. Physicists are still puzzled concerning what happened 10 to the negative 43rd seconds after the Big Bang, but understand that we do not have a complete quantum theory of gravity currently. Quantum theory addresses what general relativity cannot, and that is to address nature at its smallest scale. Since extreme gravity warps time and space, it is logical to therefore conclude that at that point, matter and energy were eternal. This has led physicists to conclude that time is yet another dimension. Now we have to consider Richard Feynman's sum over histories, which state that particles do not have a definite history. When a particle travels from starting point A to B, the path it takes is every path possible. In the famous particle slit experiment, particles were shot at a screen with two slits in front of it. The particles did not take a definite path and instead had different paths due to particle interference, sort of like water ripples. This principle can be applied to what we observe in our universe. Point A does not exist per se, because all of the histories that the particle could have taken, therefore we have to consider all possible histories. The conclusion is that the universe began in every possible way spontaneously. Think of our universe as an expanding balloon or bubble. Our universe could have easily been the result of successful inflation of multiverses, a rift in space-time, or in a soup of failed inflations of other universes, like looking at bubbles in your pot of boiling water. This idea was set forth by physicist Arthur Eddington, which states that quantum universes lead to the creation of tiny universes out of nothing. A few reach critical size and therefore expand in an inflationary manner. What physicists define as nothing is different from the colloquial definition of nothing. By observing the cosmic microwave background radiation, we see variations in temperature of the universe, which therefore demonstrates a much hotter beginning. Think of the cosmic microwave background radiation as a blueprint of the observable universe. Physicists have to consider all probable histories of the universe in order to make present predictions. According to theoretical physicist Lawrence Krauss, he states,
"We live in a special time, the only time where we can observationally verify that we live in a special time." What is so unique about this moment in time that makes this possible?
Well, it was a facetious remark, literally, but there's an amazing amount we can see in the universe. And one of the greatest discoveries and surprises in the last generation, if not the last century, is that the dominant energy of the universe resides in empty space, in nothing. You take a bit of space, get rid of all the particles, all the radiation, and everything, and we find that that space weighs something, and we don't understand why. The fact that we can observe that at the present time is remarkable, and it's one of the things that led us and led me to write the book, because in fact it made us realize that essentially you can get a universe from nothing without any supernatural shenanigans. That basically, by quantum mechanics and the laws of physics we understand in principle, an entire universe with 100 billion galaxies, each containing 100 billion stars, can come from nothing because its total energy could be zero. And therefore, you don't need to literally violate any laws of physics to create a universe. And no, we don't know that for certain, but even that possibility is amazing. And I find it worth celebrating the fact that we can probe such things, and we shouldn't be afraid of a universe that maybe has no purpose, because we create our own purpose, and our own purpose adds more meaning to our lives. It means our brief moment in the sun matters because that's the only moment we have.
And
A question comes to mind. Is it reasonable to ask for explanations ad infinitum? Asserting that an intelligent agent was responsible for the spontaneous creation of the universe is begging the question, or to assume the conclusion which you are arguing for. Aaron Ra describes it as the logical fallacy of the circular argument riding back to your assumed conclusion. Infinite regress will not allow for an infinitely more complex designer being responsible for the creation of the universe, because that too requires an explanation. Special pleading is not an option. Trying to demonstrate something with logic alone, especially a deity, is not only fallacious, proof by logic fallacy is not how scientific demonstrations are done. You would need logical argument, then evidence, and vice versa. Quote-unquote nothing has not been adequately defined by theists, and vague uses of words that have different meanings to physicists are irrelevant. Tracy Harris once asked for an example of nothing from a theist caller on the Atheist Experience, and then he realized that if he had done so, he would be given an example of something.
What you're really asserting, and the thing that is demonstrable, is something can come from something. We don't have a nothing to see whether or not anything can come from it. So a claim that regards nothing is the useless claim. All what you're saying is we have a lot of examples of something coming from something. In fact, every example we have is something coming from something else. And I understand that. But to say that something can't come from nothing, you have to have a nothing. And I've never seen that, so I don't know even what that is.
You do agree that as far as something coming from something, that's the only thing that makes sense.
Only because we don't have nothing.
Okay, but what you're telling me as a rational thinker that logically it makes sense that nothing can produce something.
No, I haven't said that at all. I haven't said that at all. As a matter of fact, I've said we can't, and Tracy's pointed out twice now that we can't assess that.
Something cannot come from nothing?
You've never examined nothing, so how can you make any assessment of it?
First, nothing to be able to do something is a logical absurdity.
Then you're being absurd when you...
But
you're talking about nothing, as though it is something. So what I'm asking, you're invoking it.
Nothing is non-existent. It's non-being.
What is that?
You can certainly imagine non-being. It's non-existent.
Give me an example of something that is nothing that we have examined.
To go ahead and give an example of nothing, in order to give an example, I'd have to give you an example of something, which would sort of contradict...
Wait, so what are we talking about?
So, until atheists define their terms and demonstrate an absolute nothing, it is going to be impossible to take their argument seriously.